Chapter 20. Robert stared into Foreman's cold eyes, gritting his teeth, shaking off the fear. He felt like a dog shaking off water. "All right, Mr. Fancy Pants Crime Boss," Robert quipped, his voice wavering a hair below confident. "Let's see how well you dance." Knowing that Foreman wanted him alive, Robert decided that a direct challenge might be the best course. He set down his small pistol and raised his hands, balled into fists. Foreman smirked, tossing the gun and rolling up the sleeves of his expensive suit. "I've always enjoyed a tango, Rob." "Please," Robert said as they circled each other. "Don't call me that." With the desperation of a cornered animal, Robert lunged at Foreman, fists flying. His every move was fueled by sheer determination and knowledge. He couldn't afford to lose. The air was tense as their bodies collided in a chaotic whirlwind of punches and kicks. "Didn't anyone ever teach you not to hit your elders?" Foreman taunted as they exchanged blows. Robert grunted between gasps of breath, landing a solid punch on Foreman's jaw. "I must have missed that lesson." Foreman staggered back, wiping a trickle of blood from his mouth. He chuckled. "Not bad, but you're still out of your league." "Am I?" Robert's mind raced as he searched for an opening. He wondered if sarcasm could be weaponized. Maybe that was his secret power. In the heat of battle, Robert landed a few successful hits on Foreman, each feeling like a minor victory against the oppressive crime boss. But Foreman fought back fiercely, the ferocity that only a lifetime of skulking in the shadows could breed. "Come on, Foreman," Robert panted, ducking a wild swing. "Is that all you've got?" Foreman growled, his eyes narrowing as he shifted into a more aggressive stance. Robert's muscles screamed from the exertion. He couldn't keep this up forever. But neither could Foreman. And if there was one thing Robert had learned during his time in the rundown city, it was how to take a beating and come back swinging. Robert lunged forward with renewed vigor. "Time for your last dance." Robert's breaths came in ragged gasps as he fought to maintain control of the situation. Foreman's relentless assault a whirlwind of jabs and hooks. His mind raced in the heat of battle, grasping for any advantage or scrap of knowledge that could give him the edge he desperately needed. Robert grinned as he dodged a vicious blow, redirecting Foreman's momentum and sending him stumbling forward. He pressed his advantage, driving Foreman back with a series of calculated strikes. Sweat beaded on his brow, muscles straining as he danced through the shadows, a deadly ballet of violence. Robert taunted, dodging a haymaker that would have sent him sprawling and putting himself into a position close to the gun on the ground. "Did they forget to recharge your batteries?" "Listen here, you piece of shit," Foreman snarled, lunging forward with an unexpected ferocity. But Robert was ready. Drawing upon every ounce of speed, he snagged at Foreman's weapon, which was barely within Robert's reach. He briefly experienced a moment of dominance and felt his heart beating like a bass drum. Foreman stared at him, eyes blazing with rage and disbelief, but Robert could see the flicker of uncertainty hidden beneath the surface. The tables had turned, and they both knew it. Robert's grip on Foreman's weapon tightened, the cold metal reassuring in his hand. With a sardonic grin, he feinted left before darting right, using the momentum to deliver a swift kick to the crime lord's solar plexus. "Didn't see that coming, did you?" Robert quipped, his voice laced with dark humor. Foreman gasped. The wind was knocked out of him, but his eyes never left Robert's. He lunged forward again, desperation fueling every movement. But this time, Robert was prepared. "Nice try," Robert said as he sidestepped an attack and sent Foreman into a plush lounging chair. The crime lord rested, almost admitting defeat. "Can I ask you something?" The question hung in the air with tension. Foreman stared at him, eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Why are you doing this?" Robert asked slowly. "There are plenty of other ways to make money. Why go through all this trouble? Why destroy so many lives?" Foreman paused momentarily, studying Robert as if seeing him for the first time. He laughed low and soft before shaking his head in disbelief. "If it wasn't me, it would be someone else. I might as well profit and keep the powerful people on my side. That and I enjoy being the one with people's respect." Robert spared no time for further banter. He aimed center mass and fired the crime bosses, gun at its owner 3 times. "That's enough." The words tasted bittersweet on his tongue. As Foreman's body crumpled into the chair, Robert felt relief and sorrow for the victims. He took a shaky step back, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the weight of what he'd done settling heavily on his shoulders. Is it over? The weight of the past months, the deaths he was responsible for, and the lives he was about to save hit Robert like a tidal wave. He stared at Foreman's body, stomach churning as the reality of his situation set in. The acrid smell of burnt ozone filled Robert's nostrils as he stepped over the wreckage of Foreman's lair, the scent of an energy gun's usage. His mind was clear and focused on the mission ahead of him. Now, it was time to go back to the victims. Robert braced himself and set off at a brisk jog, weaving his way through the twisting corridors of the warehouse. He passed deserted hallways, splintered wood, and discarded objects from another life, all remnants of Foreman's criminal activities. The gang members were all looking for Robert outside, none believing that any man would be so bold as to hunt down their boss. He reached the storage room door where he had left the abductees. Taking a deep breath, Robert stepped inside. The room was cramped and dark, but as Robert's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw a sight that filled him with relief. "Hey," Robert's voice cracked with the effort. "You're safe now. I promise." He approached the nearest victim, a young woman with hair matted to her face by sweat and grime. Crouching down, he offered her a reassuring smile. "My name's Robert Fannec. I'm going to get you all out of here, okay?" "Thank you," the young woman murmured, her fingers clutching at the tattered fabric of her clothes as if it were a lifeline. Robert offered her another smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No need for that. I'm doing what anyone else would." But as he surveyed the room, the broken remains of Foreman's operation strewn about like discarded toys, he knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have. "All right, Ace." His voice was hushed as he surveyed the warehouse, eyes sharp and alert for threats. "We need to get these people out of here without drawing attention. Any ideas?" Indeed, the orb's soothing voice did not betray any hint of anxiety. "We suggest taking an inconspicuous route through the back of the warehouse. There are few thugs still in that outside area, from what we can tell." Robert nodded briskly. Sweat beaded on his forehead, a reminder of the desperate situation they were in. He turned toward the victims, heart aching for their plight as the fear etched onto their faces hit him. "Listen up, everyone," Robert said, pitching his voice low but firm. "We're going to get you out of here, but we must tiptoe and stay together. I'll be leading the way. We've got this." A flicker of relief shimmered across the victims' faces, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. They gathered close to Robert, their gazes locked onto him as if he were their lifeline. "Remember," he addressed them wryly, "silence is golden, and in our case, it might save our lives." "Very poetic," Ace chimed in, prompting a soft chuckle from Robert. "Thanks, I try," he retorted, the dark humor momentarily lightening the tension in his chest. He scanned the room one last time. "Let's move out." As they set off, Robert's thoughts raced, his determination fueled by the knowledge that every step brought them closer to safety. The shadows clung to them like a shroud, concealing their passage as they navigated the poorly lit warehouse. "Stay close," he whispered, leading the huddled group through the maze of crates and machinery. "And keep your heads down." "Doing amazing," Ace encouraged from the comm in Robert's ear. "There's a door up ahead that leads to the back alley." "Let's hope it stays that way," Robert replied, his words spiked with equal parts hope and trepidation. They inched closer to the door, each step echoing in Robert's ears. And though uncertainty still gnawed at his insides, he knew one thing for sure. They wouldn't go down without a fight. "All right, everyone," he said, injecting as much confidence into his voice as he can muster. "We're heading for the back door. Stick close to me, and we'll get through this. Your wish is our comma." "Can it, Ace?" Robert suppressed the urge to roll his eyes. He wondered, not for the first time, if AIs were programmed to be insufferable on purpose, but there was no time to dwell on that now. Every second they wasted was another opportunity for Foreman's gang to discover their escape. As they moved in a tight cluster, Robert kept his senses razor sharp, acutely aware of every creaking floorboard and labored breath. He felt like a panther stalking its prey, ready to pounce at the first sign of danger. The warehouse seemed to stretch out before them, like a twisted labyrinth, filled with shadows that whispered of unseen threats lurking beyond the edge of his vision. "Stay low," he cautioned the group, his voice barely audible as they inched closer to their goal. "And try not to make any noise." "You should consider a career in motivational speaking, Mr. Fannec." "Focus, Ace." Robert grated his teeth against the wave of irritation. Despite his bravado, he knew the stakes and could not afford distractions. As Robert progressed step by step, a swell of anxiety rose within him, lodging a lump in his throat that he struggled to swallow down. Internally, thoughts crossed his mind, conveying a desperate hope that he was up to the immense task. With each footfall, the staggering weight of responsibility bore down unrelentingly, threatening to overwhelm and crush him. Though no words were uttered aloud, the gravity of the situation was written plainly on Robert's face, evident in the grim expression and tense posture of a man carrying a tremendous burden. But as they finally reached the door, the promise of salvation now within arm's reach, Robert allowed himself a moment of triumph, a flicker of relief that burned away the fog of fear and doubt clouding his mind. "We made it." His eyes met the victim's eyes as they shared a silent understanding. Robert nodded, preparing himself for the final push. "Let's go." As they exited their prison, Robert spotted two of Foreman's goons up ahead, engaged in animated conversation, bathed in overhead light contrasting against the night sky. He tensed, adrenaline coursing through his veins, and the muscles in his lean frame coiled like springs, ready to be released. "Stay here," he ordered the victims, his voice low and urgent. He turned to face the gang members, cursing at the fact that he lost all the gear he had brought during the mission. "Of course, there are a couple of thugs waiting to ruin my day." Without warning, Robert shot them both, one in the stomach and the other in the back. He took no time to regret or think about his actions. It was getting easier to take life, and he wasn't sure how to feel about that. "Thanks for playing," he said under his breath. Robert ushered the freed victims forward, guiding them past the dead gang members. He felt pride in his resourcefulness as they made their way out the back door to safety. He'd come a long way since his days as another aimless wanderer on Mool, and for the first time in his life, he felt like the hero of his own story. He urged the group, glancing back at the defeated goons. "We're almost there." "Nicely done." Ace's voice was filled with grudging admiration. "We must admit, you've exceeded our expectations, but believe us, they weren't particularly high to begin with." A sardonic smile touched Robert's lips. "I knew I could always count on you for a backhanded compliment." Despite the banter, relief coursed through him like a balm, soothing the raw edges of his nerves. They were that much closer to escaping Foreman's clutches, and soon they'd find themselves bathed in the light of freedom, leaving the darkness of this nightmare far behind. Gritting his teeth against the sharp sting of his wounds, Robert pressed onward, the ragtag group following closely behind him. He couldn't afford to slow down now, not when they were so close to escaping this hellhole. They were making their way around the other buildings by starlight. As they reached the spot where the gate guard would be, Robert peered around, scanning the area for any signs of danger. The night was dark and muted, the stars winking overhead like 1,000 watchful eyes. Satisfied that the coast was clear, he returned to the huddled victims of Mr. Foreman. "Okay, everyone." His voice was as steady as he could manage despite his exhaustion. "We'll go out single file. Keep low and move fast. Got it?" A large lit parking lot was between their hiding spot and the gate. Robert didn't want the entire group running across and getting caught. He thought it would be better to keep them mostly hidden while, one at a time, they escaped. At this point, the goons likely knew Foreman was dead, and they would probably fire on sight. There was no reason to get them all killed. His charges nodded, their faces pale and drawn, but they drew strength from Robert's determination. He nodded back, swallowing the lump in his throat. It was up to him to get these people to safety, and he refused to let them down. "All right," he took a deep breath. "Let's go." He ushered the first former prisoner through the gate, the same entrance he had entered what felt like years ago when he started this journey. He watched as they hurried into the open, with fear and relief etched across their faces. Robert's chest tightened, but he pushed the sensation aside. "Next," he said, gesturing for another to follow. The people entered the night, one by one, each disappearing through the gate like a weight lifted from Robert's shoulders. "Thank you," one of them said as they passed Robert, their eyes filled with gratitude. The simple words shivered down his spine. He'd never been anyone's savior. "Of course," he replied, forcing a smile. His current focus was the safety of everyone, so he could not afford to think about it now. "Keep moving," he urged the remaining victims. The last person slipped through the gate, and Robert allowed himself a moment of relief. "Can't leave any stragglers behind." Robert scoured the dark recesses with hawk-like eyes. The silence was eerie, like the calm before a storm. He knew he must be swift, but thorough in his search. "Ace, are we giving these fine people a ride home?" Robert left the question hanging. "Mr. Fannec, we have anonymously notified the local SLPS about the people you have saved. They are on their way in full force, something you've seen before." "So I don't have to go back to save the rest of the people?" Robert asked, hoping that his mission was accomplished and he could head home soon. The cool night air hit him like a tidal wave, washing away some of the suffocating tension within him. The gas giant Mool orbits cast a silvery glow over the scene, highlighting the trembling forms of the former prisoners huddled together for comfort. They looked at him with a mix of hope and apprehension, their gazes filled with unspoken questions. "That is correct," Commander Kane is leading this as well. So you know, at least he'll do a decent job mopping up this place. Tell them to hurry. His eyes darted around the surrounding area. He couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lurked in the shadows, poised to strike at any moment. Relax, Ace chided him gently. We've done all we can for now. Robert scanned the darkness like a sentinel. You won't have to endure the consequences of what happened here like I will. Not entirely true, Robert. All right, Robert rolled his eyes. No need to rub it in. As they waited, Robert reflected on the chaotic events that had led them here. The bloodshed, the fear, the triumph. A strange sense of satisfaction filled him. He'd made a difference, however small. Let's hope it lasts, he muttered, watching the horizon for signs of their rescue. Robert scanned the dark areas vigilantly. The victims under the flickering street lamp, the same street lamp his van had broken down next to, showed relief and fear in equal measure. Stay close. His voice was roughened by fatigue. There was still work to be done. Mr. Fannec, Ace chimed in, its voice a familiar presence in his ear. Extraction is approximately 3 minutes away. I suggest you prepare the group and yourself for departure. Thanks, Ace. Robert attempted to quell the anxiety gnawing at the edges of his mind. I'll get right on that. Good luck, the AI replied, a hint of sarcasm creeping into its tone. Robert grunted under his breath as he moved among the people he had saved, his hands gently resting on shoulders and offering reassuring smiles. The weight of responsibility felt like an anvil pressing down upon him. Guys, we're about ready to go. He forced an air of calm confidence. When the rescue team arrives, stay together. You've come this far. Let's finish strong. Thank you, a woman said, her voice choking with emotion. You saved us. Robert nodded, exhaustion and guilt close to taking over. As the minutes ticked by, the silence stretched taut, laced with tension and anticipation. The shadows seemed to dance and twist in Robert's peripheral vision, threatening to reveal hidden dangers at any moment. Come on. Robert tapped his foot on the pavement. Mr. Fannec, it's time to go. You wouldn't want to get rewarded for saving a bunch of innocents by being thrown into a jail cell and forgotten, would you? And then, like a beacon piercing through the darkness, the rescue ship descended into view, its bright lights casting an otherworldly glow over the scene. The hum of its engines could be heard, even though it was still minutes out. Showing that they were moving fast, the roar of thrusters was typically muted by systems that reduced the speed of the vehicles. Knowing that SLPS would at least take the victims, Robert escaped to his ship, which Ace had moved behind the scrapyard. Ace revived the ship's engines, and Robert took off with a deafening roar. He looked back one last time, relieved to see the trafficked people safe in the hands of those who could help them. At least, he hoped. He felt no joy as he flew away. Instead, he felt that same lingering sense of guilt mixed with exhaustion and sadness. No matter what transpired, he realized the reward of such heroism far outweighed any costs. But Robert paid the fees, while those who reaped the rewards considered him a hero. It didn't seem fair. Robert stared out the window of his ship as he made his way home in the dark. He looked down at the barren landscape, turning to a cityscape below, lit up in a brilliant display of life and activity. How quickly things can change, he thought to himself. With a heavy sigh, he shook his head, trying to clear it from such thoughts. He would have to deal with those feelings later. Right now, he needed to focus on returning to base without attracting attention. Darkness enveloped him as night swept across the skies. The stars twinkled like hundreds of beacons guiding him home. But it wasn't stars that graced the darkness. Memories from today haunted him like ghosts in the shadows, constantly reminding him how fragile life was. He hoped those he left behind in the warehouse were okay. During the brief trip to the deserted asteroid, he took time alone to reflect on what he had done when he willingly murdered several people, including the gangster who had destroyed countless lives. While he didn't like the feeling, he knew he would sacrifice more than he already had to help those he could. But maybe that was a more considerable trade-off than he knew. The feeling of relief washed over Robert as he saw the comforting lights of his new home come into view. With a heavy heart, he disembarked from his ship, accepting that while one battle had ended for now, its effects would linger with him long after this day had passed.